I'm Laura Elaine Ellis, and it is my joy to welcome Amadi Baye Washington and Sam Asa Pratt, aka Baye and Asa, the brilliant co-directors and choreographers of Second Seed, which is part of the Raising Voices program that will stream from October 15th through the 24th during the full festival run of the SF Dance Film Festival. I would love to start with you sharing a little bit about your background as creative collaborators.
So I'm Amadi and this is Sam. And we have known each other since we were in first grade. We're lucky to have a history of dance partnership, but we've been choreographing with each other for about the last 6 years. And we've been working on Second Seed almost throughout that entire collaboration. We've started to make other work recently, but we spent a lot of time on this project and we're very happy to be included in the San Francisco Dance Film Festival and to continue our partnership with you guys involved.
I did read quite a bit about Second Seed, some of the other spaces that also truly appreciate and showed this film. Read a couple of times around the creatives that were also part of this project. But what I don't know is your first project on film like this? Were you like others choreographers before COVID doing your thing on proscenium stages and other spaces? Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. Well, this is our first film project, and together or separately, it's our first film project ever. And we were very proud to arrive to this point after years of research on the Birth of a Nation and kind of placing it in different live performance contexts. And those years of research and developing a duet and then an evening length group piece then kind of culminated in us feeling like the logical evolution of Second Seed was into a film. And the film kind of has a different spin on the Birth of a Nation, or a different response to the Birth of a Nation the live work did. That was more of a direct representation of Griffith's world. We were using projection from the film. We were using text from the film as we do in the Second Seed film. But it was more, it elicited more memories of the time and of the film specifically.
Yes.
And what we wanted to do in our film was kind of take a timeless look at the Birth of a Nation. So something that wasn't necessarily set in a specific time period and didn't have specific characters from the film, but that addresses the ways in which the film portrays white and black characters and spin that and muck that up a little bit to show that Griffith's film was really a diluted, sick way of looking at blackness, and also a very skewed way of looking at whiteness, white people as people with valor and honor and dignity. We put this guy in a bunch of paint to show that he's actually, insane.
That
specifically.
that those images were extremely striking to me, and it didn't get by me that there's also a ritual in the body painting in a number of countries throughout the continent of Africa, whether that's Liberia or the Congo. So I was also seeing this other sort of representation with the white body paint as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it could also be a reference to tar and feathering, which is also how we arrived at that as a necessary image. An inversion of that as a color, right? The blackness of tar and the whiteness of this paint, but also a representation of sort of internal delusion.
Madness, like insanity. And the decaying of morals, really, right?
A decaying of morals, a decaying of reason, a loss of the self.
And a glorification of this alternative narrative, that has been constructed, right? The alternative narrative within The Birth of a Nation is
Sure.
that the
Sure.
KKK are white saviors of a white race in trouble of losing their grip on social life, political life, as Reconstruction happens and this country emerges from the Civil War. So as that was happening, as Black people were for the first time participating in politics and owning land and walking on the street in a way they hadn't been allowed to previously, there was this real fear from white people that they were losing their country. And so the Klan is sort of represented as these valiant knights who are saving what is referred to as the helpless white minority. That's text from Griffith's original film.
And so there was this very vigorous fight from the NAACP during that time, from the Crisis, the paper that was founded. One of the founders is W.E. Du Bois, and then the Chicago Defender, giving very harsh reviews on Birth of a Nation during that time. And many politicians and citizens of African descent, American citizens of African descent, wanting that movie to be stopped. They wanted it censored, the really challenging parts removed, and or cities not showing the film because they feared violence against Black bodies would take place, and it would really charge up an already racially charged time, because this is just at the beginning of when grandfather clauses around voting would come in, right? Disenfranchising Black people from voting. And it was the onset of Jim Crow, because just 5 years later, we're in 1920.
Exactly.
And then that brings me to the Oscar Michaux film that was then created in response to that film, which I found fascinating as well.
Yeah, and we didn't spend a lot of time using the Oscar Michaux film as necessarily a direct resource for inspiration for our film, but it is clearly a response to Griffith's film. And there, we refer to The Birth of a Nation as a Hollywood artifact. We refer to it as something that is memorialized not only at the time, because it was the first film screened in the White House, and it had critical acclaim, and it was the most expensive film ever created to date in America and the world. And so, to have one of the first Black filmmakers make a clear and direct response to that film is such a powerful statement in the wake of Jim Crow and all of these other things that you just mentioned. And, The Birth of a Nation is something that has been taught in film schools since it was made. And you can watch the movie almost in this like weird way where, like, especially if you're listening to one of the sound scores that used to accompany it, it has this raw element of beauty. You can see the amount of production work that was put into it, and yet it is violent and grotesque and disgusting. And that was something that we grappled with in making our film. How do we respond to this thing? How do we respond to this film in a way that feels also beautiful and grotesque to us? And that honors the fact that it is an artifact, but also shows why it is an artifact. It is an artifact because it is horrendous. It is an artifact because, not just because it's a beautiful piece of cinema, but because it is also a kind of linchpin of racism.
Yeah, and a time capsule of what that is. And I feel like Within Our Gates also does that so many years later in 1920. And the governor, the censorship board, the board of censorship, approved that film, even though there were numerous requests from the NAACP to rebuke the film. And there were some members on the board that did. It was actually split. But they would eventually go ahead and give it complete approval. And it took within our gates 2 months to be approved before it could premiere.
Really?
Yeah, so there again, right?
Yeah.
Um, because it was speaking truth. It was actually telling it like it is.
Yeah.
Um, um,
And also it was showing Black people dignified and as themselves. Not,
educated.
yeah, yeah.
Well, you know, I think though the thing is that we found, and when we started making our live version for the
Yeah.
stage
Yeah.
of, you know, our response to Second Seed, our Second Seed, our response to the Birth of a Nation, it was a lot about showing the sort of same dynamics. So I would be this, you know, I was portrayed as like the valiant white man, and Amadi was, you know, embodying more of those animalistic qualities that you see the way that Black people are portrayed in the film. But I think what ultimately Birth of a Nation is really about the white perception and the white gaze more than it has anything to do about Blackness in America. It has nothing to do with Blackness. In actuality, it has everything to do with the way that white people are afraid of Black people and the way that white people are perceiving the world around them.
But in that, it had direct impact on Black lives.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Right? So, yeah.
Absolutely. It gave way to this the second wave of the KKK. As you entered into Jim Crow.
all the enacted laws and restrictions that would then follow that into Jim Crow.
Absolutely.
So historically, it's more than an artifact. It really did have very dramatic and long-standing repercussions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Baye, someone with your history, right, of your people, what was it like embodying this character in the film?
I think you know, it's a conversation we've had a lot, and it's something that I thought about at the time when we filmed the film, and that I still think about. You know, the film kind of has two separate worlds. There's one where there's times where we're in the woods. There's times where we're in this kind of more black box studio area. And so my character was different in both of those spaces, because in the black box studio area, I was kind of a caricature of Blackness from Griffith's film. And so I was portraying these archetypes that don't necessarily resonate with who I feel like I am, but that I have to tap into in order to portray this twisted vision that Griffith had. And then in the woods, when we were outside, I found myself kind of a representation of the white gaze. And that's something that we kept coming back to, right? Like, who are the Black characters in the film, right? And that's something that you constantly ask in Griffith's film also. Who are the Black characters in the film? And they're not really their own people. They're just archetypes. They're just images of barbarism.
Right?
Yeah, there's literally Black people in Congress with their feet up on the table, eating fried chicken. Like, there are these really specific images that stereotype Black people and don't give them any agency over their own identity. And because we were trying to use this film to go back and look at the white gaze, but show the white gaze from a different perspective and show that it's diluted, there were ways in which my character once again lacked formal identity, but had more dignity and had more personal authority and decision-making capability than the characters in Griffith's film.
Right.
And so, you know, the motivations changed from the beginning to the end for who I was in the film, because at first I'm kind of with this guy and all the other characters in the film. We're trying to get along. And then once we see that something is going wrong and something is not right, I choose to remove myself from the situation. And so I think in a way that's a representation of what a lot of Black people have to go through in contemporary American society, which is like, well, if I'm not going to get it over here from the palm of the white man's hand,
the colonizer.
yeah, there we go. Then I have to go do it myself.
Right.
I have to go figure out my own way. I have to figure out my own life. I have to let them do what they're going to do, because that over there is not something I want to be a part of. And that's where I think there is agency and there is identity bestowed on my character in the film.
Yeah. And Asa, same question. What was it like for you to embody this character in the film?
Exciting and sad, and empowering, and as an actor, and also upsetting and dark. And it was all of those things at the same time, which as a performer, it was, you know, fun to do. And there was a lot to work with. I think what I said a little bit earlier about the film is really about the white gaze. And that's what we wanted to that's what we wanted out of Second Seed, is to create this narrative of the strength of white delusion. And I think Amadi is right that it starts with us in the woods, and then Amadi has this moment with the younger white woman, who is, you know, it's maybe my child, it's maybe someone who's younger than me, and a young white woman. And I think it's you know, one of the most famous scenes from A Birth of a Nation is when this young white woman is running away from a black, I say black because it's a white man in blackface, and she's running away from this character, Gus. And instead of being touched by this character, she decides to kill herself and throw herself off the cliff. And so we start the film with a young white woman's legs running through the woods. And that's how we start, because it's the most famous image from the film. And it's also maybe the most primal white fear, that Black men are coming to sexually provoke and attack white women. So that's the first, when Amadi has that duet with her in the black box studio that seems sexual to me, even though in the woods nothing is sort of happening. That's the first iteration of my delusion sort of taking my character's imagination beyond what is actually happening in the real world. So that's the first iteration of that evolution. And then my character sort of just continues to do that, where I even murder a young child, where I sort of take off my clothes, where I am lost in the sort of reverie of painting myself in this whiteness, in my own delusion, and all of these things. And eventually I am the image of the crazed, sort of the way that crazed blackness exists in The Birth of a Nation. I become that as the white person at the end of our film.
Yeah.
Right. I am the one animalistically walking through the woods. I am the one with my eyes darting and my tongue out. Right. I am the white person, is the person embodying all of these things that are characteristically thrown on top of blackness in The Birth of a Nation.
Yes. In the response film that you've created, Second Seed.
Yes.
Yeah. And interesting, like those images, that is some of the dangerous filmmaking choices that Griffith made. And I say dangerous because there are still men dealing with prison sentences, falsely accused of raping and attacking white women. So that's still an issue in our country. And that is something that was prevalent and very outstanding in that film, like you said. And one of the scenes at the NAACP and those papers, The Crisis and Defender, that was one of the scenes they wanted completely cut from the film. And the Board of Censorship would not do it.
Right. And we see as recently as like in the last few years, you know, the woman who said that Emmett Till whistled at her. She said it was a lie. And we see the falsification, the fabrication of all of these really, really traditional stereotypes in American society about Black Black people from the white gaze, from the white perspective,
Yeah.
portrayed in that film. D.W. Griffith really set up a lot. Yeah.
The social construct of race, right? It's a
Mhm.
man-made construct, typified in a film like The Birth of a Nation, and then it has real political and social impact in this country.
Exactly.
And I cut you off, Asa, so let me give
No,
you.
you're saying, I want to respond to everything you're just saying because it has all of those repercussions politically, socially, in the public sphere. And I think Amadi and Missy, the other Black woman in the film in Second Seed, their choice to walk away is emblematic of the fact that it's not on Black people to fix this shit.
Mhm.
It's not on them to educate the white people and to make the white people aware and to have patience for the white people saying you're done and now we can move on. Like, right? It's not on them.
And to cry and to feel guilty and
it's
hold
not
up
on
their
them,
hands.
right? And this is
It's not
and you're speaking, right? And you're speaking about the sort of liberal whiteness in this country, and think which is an excellent, which is even the next layer.
Because it's also insidious. It's insidious.
100% it is. 100% it is.
Because it's less overt, and people want to try to hide and say, well no, I have
back.
one friend.
I'm behind you 10%.
Yeah, 10%. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, Asa. That's so important.
Mhm.
So it kind of rolls right into my next prompt, right? Why this film then? I mean, you spoke about it being on stage. Why this film and why now? Was it just COVID, or really was it about you wanting to take this deeper experience into something that you have been working on and researching? It's been in your psyche and in your creative sphere for a while. We're seeing it for the first time and going, what?
And so The Birth of a Nation was where our first project started as collaborators and co-choreographers. And, in response to why now specifically, I don't know if Second Seed would have resonated more if it was released 5 years ago or 5 years from now, because racism is also timeless, unfortunately. And so, the ways in which Second Seed has resonated with the people that have seen it, the ways that it has picked up attention during the pandemic, I think is maybe specific to the time because of what happened last summer and the racial reckoning regarding the lynching of George Floyd. And also being in a time of stasis where everybody had a lot of time to reflect on systemic failures in America. Yes. And what it means to not have access to healthcare, or what it means to not have access to housing. A lot of people who were white experienced these things the first time. What it means to lose everything. Yes. And so when we released Second Seed and when we started sending it to film festivals, it had a different sort of resonance that we never even expected. But when we shot the film, it was probably it was first started to shoot it around 2018, and we didn't conceive of it until like 2017. And we started working on this whole body of work back in 2015. So, the answer to why now is is always going to be relevant. And we will continue to make work that talks about race in America.
And there are contemporary examples of how this the lineage of this work and this narrative, like within the film itself, like when myself and the other white woman are running towards this figure at the end of the film, there are these you hear these sounds, and that's taken from the Charlottesville neo-Nazis who were marching. So it's there are references to contemporary versions of all of this within Second Seed, and there just continue to be examples of it. From January 6th, you could talk about the entire MAGA movement, this obsession with conspiracy theory now, it's all right. The entire premise of the Klan's existence in Birth of a Nation is a conspiracy theory, right? That Black people are coming for the whole country, right? That that itself is a white fear response to conspiracy. And I think while we were setting these live works, these live dance works, and we're watching The Birth of a Nation over and over again, and we're really digging into this source material, you see that between the sparse text slides of The Birth of a Nation, the meat of the story and the stakes of relationships are communicated through the body and through emphatic gesture. And we're like, oh, hold on. Silent film is dance film. And so when we made that connection, we were like, okay, the natural evolution of this work is a dance film. And that, you know, it opened a lot of stuff and options and wonderful revelations for us as choreographers.
Right.
And it was an extremely exciting process. And it was, you know, in some ways lucky that we had this thing that we filmed way before COVID. And we had this thing to proliferate throughout the pandemic that we were able to give to our community for free and then submit to film festivals.
Yeah, we were in a, you know, as dance makers during the pandemic, a lot of people were like scrambling to be like, how can we pivot to film? We were lucky that we had all of the film, and what we needed to do was edit and get the sound score together. And we had already been doing that before the pandemic, and we were like, okay, now we need to release this.
Wow. That's something. That's revealing. That's really special.
Yeah.
The performances of all of the creatives in this piece, it's a haunting film, gorgeously performed, from your tip of your fingers to the tip of your toes, top of your head to the tip of your toes. You all were twirling. It's amazing. So will you really speak the names of those wonderful creatives? And I know they're in the cast listing, but I think we need to speak their names because they're really powerful performances. Will you just do that? Asa or Baye, whoever wants to.
Yeah. So we have AJ Tasley Parr, who played, she's a white woman with shorter hair, and she's in a long white dress, and she dies tragically in the first 5 minutes of the film. And she had worked with us from the beginning of this process once we started to make it into a group work, as did Missy Robinson, who is the Black woman in the film with short hair. And Missy was so wonderful to have in the process because she was also somebody who, in the creative room, really added so much verbally, really added so much of her own movement textures, and was able to give us new ways of thinking about how we wanted to make this work. And then Marla Phelan was somebody who came on just for the film. She was never part of the live work, but we were both colleagues with her in another show that we worked in, and we just knew that she would be this kind of wonderful, maniacal character, and a great partner for Sam to work with. And so we gave them each other to play off of this intense dynamic that we wanted to formulate in the film.
Again, such an outstanding moment in the film. Those frames really stand out. Cool. And who are the other folks that you want to maybe give a shout out to around the production, and what did they add in your process, which kind of goes to that prompt about the creative process? So you spoke beautifully about the research and how long, again, this idea has been sort of in your creative sphere, but the production itself could not have been easy, even starting into 2018. What was some of can you speak a little bit about your collaborative process? Clearly rooted in your long friendship.
Yes.
That's where it starts.
Definitely rooted there. We've known each other since first grade. It's a lucky thing we have. And we took lots and lots of time in the dance studio working on dramaturgy, scene work, rhythm. You touch, then you look, then you breathe, like very, very detailed about how we wanted to do these things. And, you know, I will say it's not that all of those things came across on film. We didn't get all of those moments that we'd so meticulously planned, but the preparation and creating the world and creating a sort of language around your character choices really gives you a leg up when you're just like on set and you have no time. And we had 6 days to shoot. We had 3 in the studio and we had 3 in the woods. And one of the days in the woods was raining.
No, you must repeat that. You said what?
Yeah, we had 6 days cumulatively, and that's and it was frustrating. You know, we wish we had more time, but you know, time was money, and we didn't have much of that. So we brought the cinematographer, this wonderful man named Alan Jensen, and he wanted to dance with us. And so, you know, there were some shots that required a lot of planning and a lot of rehearsal, especially the ones in the black box studio.
Because then you had to hit it and quit it.
Yeah. But the ones in the woods, it was very much like, all right, you go over here, now let's run and try to do it.
Yeah.
And that was rough. And, you know, the white paint, for example, like we only got one time. I was not going to go back and walk through the woods and go shower and come back and do it. That was ruin the daylight. So we had one shot at that. And, you know, that there were a lot of things in the initial, you know, storyboard shot list that we wanted to get.
One narrative, for example, that we weren't able to include in the film, but that was captured very, very beautifully by Alan, was the narrative of the kind of white male obsession with Black women, especially mulatto women, or what was described as mulatto women at the time. And so we had a scene with Sam and Missy where they were dancing with each other in the studio space, and he's kind of lusting after her, almost crawling after her. And we wanted to put that in juxtaposition to his anger seeing me with a white woman. And so there were little details like that we just had to completely cut from the film, because all the film that we got combined just didn't tell the story in the right way. So we had to pare it down into what was essential, but Alan did such a good job.
And then we had an incredible technician, this guy named David Bull, who helped us with lighting, and he's helped us with lighting in the past. And he really is kind of like a jack of all trades for us on the production set. He helped us find a location. It's even his legs that are featured, his calves are featured in second seat a couple of times.
Front of camera, behind the camera.
Yes, exactly. He does all things. And our composer, Jack Graybow, who we really, he really did incredible work. We use a lot of original sound from the original motion picture score for The Birth of a Nation. Yeah. But when we were creating it, we did a lot of augmentation, and he really spent hours and hours with us right over his shoulder. Was very patient with us.
Yeah, very patient.
And he's a wonderful collaborator of ours, helped produce the film. He was really pivotal to the film's success.
Fantastic. The score was so dense and amazing, and just supported everything that was happening visually and movement wise. And yes, choreographers, we don't play around with the music. We need that to really, be in sync, and that's powerful.
It was a long process making the score, but what we were really lucky to have was this guy named Rodney, who worked with the Mont Alto Motion Picture Orchestra, who was the only contemporary orchestra that had access to the archival files from the original sound score, or one of the original sound scores that was used with The Birth of a Nation. Because, you know, back in the early 20th century, when silent films were being released, what they would do is they would have a symphony orchestra or a pianist there to accompany the film. And this was one of the versions that we found. We saw probably about 3 different versions of the sound score, but we were like, we need this music. And we reached out to this guy, Rodney, and he was like, oh yeah, just send me about $20. Here's a bunch of files. Wow. And we were so lucky. Yeah, we were so
amazing.
Yeah. So he gave us carte blanche to do whatever we wanted with those files, and Jack was able to augment the music and tolerate us for a very long time in making this sound score.
Right, and then just circling back to the way you took current sounds and that score and really blended what's happening now in that continuum of racism and hatred. Is there anything else that you would like to make sure is mentioned?
No, I just, you know, like, first of all, thank you to you, Laura. You are lovely, and it's so nice to be here having this interview. And thank you to the San Francisco Dance Film Festival. Like we spent a lot of time on this. We talked about that already during this interview, but we spent a lot of time on this, and we can honestly say we're proud of it. And we go back and forth in the studio arguing a lot. We have, you know, that's a good thing about knowing each other for such a long time. You can argue and then you can just move on. But we argue, we go back and forth and try to figure out the best ways to portray these ideas that we're talking about. And like we just said, there was a lot that didn't make it into the film.
Right.
And, you know, it feels good and it feels meaningful to be able to talk about a piece of history through a new perspective and through our perspective. And so thank you for giving us this opportunity. And yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's courageous, right? And great art making is about courage and it is about risk taking, my humble opinion. And it is about showing up as your authentic selves, your artist selves, clearly your friendship selves, your brotherhood that you have. And I think that's something that resonates now that I've met you and I've heard about your history. That is also very valuable. And now you have created something that will be long lasting and perhaps in years to come, there'll be filmmakers and dance makers that will be talking about Second Seed and this important work that you've created.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Absolutely. Thank you.